Welcome to Keeping Score. I'm Rick Horrow. Each week we bring you insights from the playmakers, deal makers, and rule makers in the world of sports. I'll give you my take on some of the items of the week using my 30 years of experience doing deals for teams, leagues, and players in the $750 billion business of sports. Plus, we'll talk with a central figure in the sports world. The views expressed in this podcast are my own and do not represent the views of Reuters. Let's get started. FIFA is looking for compensation in the U.S. as a victim of corruption. The global soccer body has applied to U.S. prosecutors for tens of millions of dollars in damages from ex-officials indicted on charges of misusing their power and influence. New President Gianni Infantino says the money had been meant for playing fields and not officials' mansions and cars. FIFA also recognized for the first time executives sold votes in World Cup hosting contests, though it didn't mention anything of the sort in connection with the 2018 World Cup in Russia or the 2022 event set for Qatar. As for Qatar, between desert weather, labor exploitation allegations, and their selection, trust me, the process is not over. Forget March Madness, call it March Adness. CBS and Turner say they're virtually sold out of commercials for the U.S. men's college basketball tournament. That's according to Broadcasting and Cable. The networks have generated record ad revenue, and new advertisers this year include the Hilton hotel chain, financial services company SoFi, fresh off a successful Super Bowl ad run, and yet-to-be-named automakers. In all, according to Kantar Media, the NCAA men's tourney brings in upwards of $1.15 billion in advertising revenue. And more growth for the top U.S. Soccer League. New Major League Soccer teams in Los Angeles and Atlanta are on track to open the 2018 season in new stadiums, while the St. Paul, Minnesota City Council approved plans for a project including a $120 million, 19,000-seat soccer-specific stadium, says the Los Angeles Times. The Atlanta team has already received deposits from more than 29,000 fans for season tickets, even though it has no coach and no players at the moment. Now to baseball and the growth of the use of statistics. My conversation with author and baseball statistician Bill James. So the bios say that since 1977, Bill James has written more than 24 books in history and stats, and I would say the godfather of statistics, the grandfather, the father. What do you think?
The creepy uncle.
The creepy uncle, ladies and gentlemen. No, in all seriousness, though, Moneyball owes the history to you. Stratomatic owes the history to you. All of the early kind of analytics view you with awe and respect. And obviously, when you were dealing with it, it was a passion. But you had no idea, or did you, that it would morph into what it is today?
I had absolutely no idea that the things that have happened would happen. I had no concept of that. But I always did believe that I was not that peculiar, and that there were a significant number of people who were also interested in the things that I was interested in. And my absolute confidence that that had to be true was the best decision that I ever made, other than perhaps, taking out my wife. When I was a young person, can't tell you how many people said to me, I'm really interested in what you're doing, but you'll never make a living doing it because there just aren't enough people like that. So many people would say that to me that I knew it couldn't be true because either the people that I met were terribly atypical or there had to be an economic number of us. So I bet on there being an economic number of us.
There were a small economic number, but they were tenacious, and then they grew with credibility, largely because of the work that you did.
No, not because of me. They grew largely because those people were always there, but they were not being served by the market. The sports writing market was not speaking to the people that it does now.
How difficult was it once you established a methodological analysis and believed in some processes to get people to inside the sports to take you seriously?
It was never my goal to get people who were working inside the sports to take me seriously, and I was really surprised at how rapidly that did happen rather than surprised that it didn't happen sooner. I was just writing to people who were interested in the same things that I was interested in. I always knew that number was larger than I was told that it was, but I was still surprised by how large it was. And I was also very surprised by how rapidly those kids who were reading my books when they were 12, I was surprised by how fast they grew up and became general managers.
What was the analytical catalyst? Was it Moneyball or was it before that?
Long before that. And again, one of the things that people tell me a lot is, oh yeah, I was reading your books a long, long time ago. Old scouts will come up to me and say, oh yeah, I was trying to get the Cincinnati Reds to pay attention to your stuff in 1983. I don't doubt they're telling the truth, but they were awfully quiet about it at the time.
Yeah, obviously. And so how do you measure heart? How do you measure the intangibles? Your metrics process slowly was accepted by people that had a little more vision? Is that one of the reasons, you think?
What I had not thought about when I was doing the stuff that became the basis of my career, what I had not thought about was that professional sports organizations actually needed an approach exactly like this. What I was concerned about was exactly how good is this player. And I was just concerned about that in the way that a fan is always concerned about that. What I really didn't think about is the fact that professional sports teams need a structured way to think about value and a structured way to think about constructing a team. And the things I was doing accidentally were very useful along that line. But I wasn't aware of that at all at the time that I was doing them.
Do you think, as we now see analytics not only accepted but in many ways preferred, is it going the other way now? Is there a threat that people are too conscious about numbers and don't view the intangibles the way they probably should?
Well, it's our job to be open to the things that we don't understand. And it was never my point that you guys don't understand baseball and here's the way you should look at it. It was always my point that there's a lot that we don't understand. There's a lot that we don't know. That's still where we are, and that's where we will be 50 years from now. It's the responsibility of people in my field to be open to seeing the things that they don't understand.
Can you get a sense or give us a sense of the broad notion of what general analytics are your favorites? What are the ones or the items that need to be analyzed that are more important to the core of baseball than others today?
Well, the importance of everything relates to its contribution to wins. And certain things are quite important to winning that we tend not to focus on. Where we are now is that we have a sophisticated enough understanding of what happens on the field that but we are still bamboozled by how unpredictable it is because of things that happen off the field. In order to get better at predicting what players are going to be able to do on the field, don't mean to invade anyone's privacy, that's not what I'm saying, but you need to get a better understanding of growth progressions in athletes, of good year, bad year cycles in athletes. And I think that those are the most rich veins that we could be examining at this time.
Some of that is inherently statistical, but without invading privacy, you need to get a window on what's in a person's mind and in a person's heart. Right. Are there metrics that can analyze that as well?
The job is not to use metrics, but to create them. Our job is to find ways to measure the things that aren't being measured.
Are we on the way to doing that with the, let's call them the intangibles today?
We always know things that we didn't know 10 years ago. There are a lot of things that we understand now that we didn't. I expect that 10 years from now that will still be true. But I don't expect that it will ever be true that we run out of questions. I always think that there are going to be things that we don't get.
We're now measuring everything, and the other piece of this is that the Billy Beans who begat the Theo Epsteins, who begat the very well-paid general managers who are making decisions with Moneyball focuses are now commanding higher salaries, and maybe the expectation is higher. Is that one way to look at how the industry is progressing?
No, I don't think you can measure how the industry is progressing at all based on who gets paid how much money, unless you can demonstrate that the money is being wasted. Then you can probably use it that way.
Interesting. So what does baseball need to do to improve its use of statistical analysis and analytics in making fundamental decisions?
It would be helpful if more people understood that factoids are integrated into decisions rather than something that sits outside decisions. A decision is a kind of a stew, and you don't sift the stew and eat the beef separately from the vegetables and then drink the broth. It's all works together.
Is it more similar or more different making Fortune 500 related core business decisions and baseball-oriented decisions?
I suspect there are a lot of parallels, but I suspect there are a lot of differences. If I could point this out, I know a lot of people who work in an office with 20 other people, and they don't have any real idea of the skill sets of the 20 people they work with. But if you ask them to name the 5 best middle infielders at turning the double play, they can tell you that in a moment. I suspect that that's true in business as well, everywhere, that the decisions that people make are driven by the information that they happen to know rather than by the information that they need. I know that that's true in baseball, and I suspect that it's true in every other field as well.
You are cornered incessantly by a mad throng of early 20-year-old and millennials wanting to have pictures taken with their hero. How does this all make you feel, by the way?
Very peculiar and very, very old. But you know what's great about it is very rarely are those young people asking me, can you tell me how I can get hired by a baseball team? But they almost always have some theory. I think this might be true. Have you ever thought about baseball this way? That's what's really great about
it. And I guess the bottom line, too, if you're advising a young person who's either watching our podcast or out there in the halls wanting to get in the middle of the sport, what would you tell them?
I get that question, too. And the best answer I can give you to that question, learn to speak Spanish. In baseball, you wouldn't believe how helpful it is to learn to speak Spanish because a lot of our players are Spanish. And one of the first questions you're going to be asked on a job interview is, do you speak Spanish? The sports teams are really teams. And you have to work together, and the people skills that are required to work inside baseball are at a very high level.
Heard this one before, so if you were the commissioner for a day, what would be the one baseball-oriented rule you would change?
Well, earlier today I was attacking the balk rule, and baseball stops too often, and one of the biggest reasons it stops too often is the balk rule. The balk rule essentially says that you can't fake a player out. Well, who needs a rule that you can't fake a player out? I mean, it's like a rule that a quarterback can't fake a run or fake a pass and then run. Why can't he?
Well, we're going to archive this podcast, and when baseball changes its rule, I'm going to send this to you and say, remember when.
Thanks for listening to this edition of Keeping Score. I'm Rick Horrow. The producer of the show, Alex Cohen. Associate producer, Bethel Habte. Assistance provided by Tanner Simpkins and Carlos Waddick. And the executive editor of Reuters Digital, Dan Colarusso.